She woke up in the freezing mud of the Kessler estate with no memory forced into servitude by a highly secretive community. She thought she was just a nobody at the bottom of the food chain. She had no idea the faded scar on her neck belonged to their ruthless leader. Ariana Forrester's life began with the scent of wet pine and copper. That was her earliest memory, waking up in the freezing rain in the dense, unforgiving woods just off Highway 58 in Oregon. She had no ID, no phone, and no recollection of how she had gotten there. All she had was a splitting headache, a lingering phantom pain across her ribs, and a peculiar jagged scar on the left side of her neck that looked like a faded burn. Before she could stumble to the highway to flag down help, she was found. But she wasn't taken to a hospital. She was taken to the Kessler estate, hidden behind wrought iron gates and miles of private forest. The estate was the ancestral home of the Caldwell family. To the outside world, the Caldwells were reclusive timber barons and tech investors. But within the heavily guarded walls, they were something else entirely. They were a pack. And in their rigid, brutal hierarchy, Ariana was immediately classified as the lowest of the low, an omega, because she had no wolf to shift into, or at least no memory of one, and smelled overwhelmingly of human fear and sterile hospital bleach. She was treated as a stray. For 2 years, Ariana lived in the damp basement beneath the estate's sprawling industrial kitchens. She didn't know the term omega at first. She only knew she was a servant bound by an invisible, terrifying, psychological tether to the people who ran the house. She cleaned the massive wolf ranges, scrubbed the bloodstains out of the hunter's clothes in the laundry, and kept her head down. The estate was run day to day by Beatrice Langdon. Beatrice was the daughter of a prominent pack elder from upstate New York, and she carried herself like a queen in waiting, tall, impeccably dressed, and possessing a cruel streak that she masked with high society manners. Beatrice made Ariana's life a living hell. Beatrice was vying for the title of Luna the Alpha's mate. The Alpha, however, was rarely around. You missed a spot on the baseboards, stray. Beatrice sneered one Tuesday afternoon, her sharp heel tapping against the terracotta tiles of the kitchen floor. Ariana, her hands raw and blistering from harsh chemical cleaners, didn't dare look up. "I'll fix it, Ms. Langdon." "See that you do. The Alpha returns from Oslo tomorrow evening. Everything must be flawless." Beatrice leaned down her voice, dropping to a dangerous low pitch. "He has no patience for incompetence, and neither do I. If you embarrass me in front of him, I'll have Lucas throw you back into the woods where we found you." Ariana swallowed hard, nodding. She had never met the Alpha, but the way the estate staff spoke of him sent shivers down her spine. Graham Caldwell. He was a man spoken of in hushed, terrified whispers. They said he had lost his mate 5 years ago in a brutal ambush by a rival syndicate down in California. They said the loss had driven him half mad, turning him into a cold, ruthless businessman who ruled his territory with an iron fist. Later that night, exhausted and aching, Ariana sat on her narrow cot in the basement. She reached up her fingers, brushing against the raised skin of the scar on her neck. It always burned when she was stressed. It wasn't a normal scar. It felt deep-rooted in her very veins. The only person who had ever shown her an ounce of kindness was the estate's private physician, Dr. Harry Reed. When she had first arrived, battered and suffering from profound amnesia, Harry had examined her. She remembered the exact moment he had seen the scar. All the color had drained from the doctor's face. He had quickly bandaged it, his hands shaking slightly, and told her in a hushed, urgent voice, "Keep this covered, Ariana. Always keep it covered. Use makeup, use a scarf. Do not let them see it." She had obeyed, layering thick concealer over it every morning, terrified of what would happen if the strict, cult-like people of the estate found out she was defective. She thought the scar marked her as diseased. She didn't know it was a claim. She didn't know it was a bite, and she certainly didn't know it was the exact shape of Graham Caldwell's teeth. The following evening, the Kessler estate was electrified with a nervous humming energy. The grand dining hall, a cavernous room with exposed timber beams and a massive stone fireplace, was set for 80 guests. The Pax elite had gathered to welcome their alpha home. Ariana was suffocating in a stiff, high-collared black uniform, stationed near the swinging doors of the kitchen. Her job was simple, but nerve-wracking: clear the empty crystal glasses and replace them without making a sound. The heavy oak doors at the front of the hall slammed open, and a sudden, terrifying silence fell over the room. Even the air seemed to grow heavy, pressing down on Ariana's chest until she could barely draw a breath. Graham Caldwell walked in. He was an imposing figure, radiating an aura of absolute dominance that made every person in the room intuitively lower their heads. He wore a dark, tailored suit that barely contained the broad, predatory lines of his shoulders. His face was striking all sharp angles and hard lines, but his eyes were what caught Ariana's attention. They were a piercing, icy grey, hollowed out by a profound exhaustion, laced grief. He looked like a man who had everything in the world, yet possessed absolutely nothing that mattered. Flanking him was his beta Lucas Mercer, a broad-shouldered man with a permanent scowl, and Beatrice, who had immediately rushed to Graham's side, looping her arm through his. Graham didn't look at her. He simply tolerated her presence as he walked toward the head of the table. "Keep your head down," Martha the head cook hissed at Ariana, shoving a silver tray of champagne flutes into her hands. "Serve the Alpha's table, and God help you if you spill a drop." Ariana's hands were trembling. The closer she got to the head table, the more intense the pressure in the air became. It was a physical weight. Her wolf, buried so deep beneath trauma and amnesia that she didn't even know it existed, began to thrash in the dark recesses of her mind. Her chest tightened. The scar on her neck began to burn with a sudden searing intensity, melting through the thick layer of concealer she had applied that morning. She approached the table from Graham's blind side. Beatrice was leaning in, whispering something into his ear, trying to pull a smile from his stoic face. "More champagne, Alpha." Beatrice purred, snapping her fingers at Ariana without looking. "Pour it straight." Ariana stepped forward, her vision tunneling. The heat radiating from Graham was unnatural. As she reached out to set the flute down, her foot caught on the heavy hem of Beatrice's designer gown. Time seemed to slow down. The silver tray tipped. With a sickening crash, the tray hit the mahogany table. 3 baccarat crystal flutes shattered, sending a wave of ice-cold champagne splashing directly onto Graham Caldwell's suit jacket. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. Lucas Mercer was on his feet in a microsecond, a low, dangerous growl vibrating in his chest. Beatrice shrieked, jumping back. "You stupid, clumsy bitch!" she screamed. "Lucas, get her out of here! Throw her in the holding cells!" Ariana fell to her knees, scrambling frantically to pick up the jagged shards of glass, completely ignoring how they sliced into her raw palms. "I'm sorry," she gasped out, tears of absolute terror pricking her eyes. "I'm so sorry I—" "Quiet!" The single word cut through the chaos like a gunshot. It wasn't a yell. It was a low, gravelly command that demanded absolute obedience. The entire room froze. Graham slowly stood up. He looked down at the cowering servant at his feet. He had intended to dismiss her to let Lucas handle the discipline of a clumsy Omega. But then a subtle shift occurred in the air current of the room. Underneath the smell of fear, spilled alcohol, and cheap kitchen soap, a scent hit him. It was faint. It was buried under 2 years of trauma and physical labor. But to an alpha, a mate's scent is etched into the very marrow of their bones. Rainwater, crushed juniper berries, vanilla. Graham's chest stopped moving. His icy grey eyes dilated, the pupils swallowing the irises entirely as his wolf surged violently to the surface. "Alpha?" Lucas asked, cautiously stepping forward. Graham ignored him. He crouched down, his movements dangerously slow, until he was eye-level with Ariana. She was shaking violently, clutching her bleeding hands to her chest, her chin tucked tight to her collarbone. She had never seen this man in her life, yet every cell in her body was screaming at her to submit, to bare her throat to him. "Look at me," Graham commanded, his voice trembling with an emotion nobody in that room had heard from him in 5 years. Ariana slowly raised her head. Graham stared at her face. It was the face of a stranger. Her nose, her cheekbones, the shape of her eyes, they belonged to a woman he did not know. Disappointment, heavy and bitter, threatened to crush him. He thought his mind was playing tricks on him, that his grief had finally fractured his sanity. But then he reached out. His large, calloused hand grabbed her shoulder. As his fingers brushed the skin of her neck, the friction wiped away the last remnants of the damp, cheap concealer. There, exposed under the harsh light of the chandeliers, was the jagged, faded scar. Graham's breath hitched. His thumb traced the outline of the mark. He knew every groove of it. He was the one who had bitten down into that flesh, claiming her soul as his own under a blood moon 7 years ago. "Where did you get this?" he whispered, his voice cracking, entirely oblivious to the 80 stunned pack members watching their ruthless leader unravel. Ariana shrank back, terrified. I don't know," she sobbed. "I woke up with it after the crash. Please, please don't hurt me." Beatrice, recovering from her shock, stepped forward, her face twisting with ugly jealousy. "Graham, she's just a lying stray. She probably got that in some back alley. Say another word. Beatrice." Graham snarled, not breaking eye contact with Ariana, his voice vibrating with a lethal possessive rage. "And I will rip your tongue from your throat." He turned his gaze back to the trembling woman on the floor. Her face was different, likely the result of severe reconstructive surgery after the crash she had just mentioned. Her memories were gone. Her wolf was dormant. But the soul beneath the skin was screaming his name. Graham didn't hesitate. Before anyone could blink, he swept Ariana up into his arms, ignoring the blood dripping from her hands onto his ruined suit. He pressed her face into his chest, burying his nose in her hair to inhale the faint, undeniable scent of his dead wife. "Meeting adjourned," Graham barked over his shoulder, carrying his terrified amnesiac mate out of the dining hall. "Lucas, call Dr. Reed. Tell him if he doesn't meet me in my quarters in 2 minutes, I'll kill him myself." The heavy mahogany doors of the Alpha's private suite slammed shut, sealing them inside a cavernous room of dark leather charcoal walls and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the sprawling Oregon pines. Graham did not drop her. He carried Ariana, trembling, bleeding, and entirely paralyzed by a cocktail of fear and confusion, straight into the adjoining master bathroom. He set her gently on the edge of a massive marble vanity. Ariana kept her eyes glued to the floor, her heart hammering wildly against her ribs. She was a stray, an omega who had just ruined a multi-million-dollar suit and embarrassed the most powerful man in the Pacific Northwest. She braced herself for the strike, for the punishment Beatrice had promised. Instead, she heard the rustle of a first aid kit. Graham knelt on the cold tile before her. His massive hands, which had ruthlessly dismantled rival packs, were surprisingly gentle as he took her injured hands in his. He used a pair of tweezers to extract the microscopic shards of baccarat crystal, from her palms. His jaw locked tight, his breathing ragged. "I'm sorry," Ariana whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I didn't mean to trip. Please, Alpha, do not call me that." Graham interrupted his voice, thick, his icy grey eyes locking onto hers. "Never call me that. Your name is Savannah." Ariana shook her head frantically. "No, sir. It's Ariana. Ariana Forrester. They found me." Before she could finish the suite, doors burst open. Dr. Harry Reed practically stumbled into the room, his medical bag clutched to his chest, his face pale and slick with a terrified sweat. He looked at Graham kneeling before the Omega, saw the exposed mark on her neck, and stopped dead in his tracks. He knew instantly that his 2-year deception had come to a violently abrupt end. Graham stood up slowly. The gentle morning man vanished, replaced by the apex predator. He crossed the bathroom in 3 massive strides, grabbing the doctor by the lapels of his coat and slamming him into the doorframe. The wood cracked under the impact. "Explain." Graham snarled his fangs, extending his voice, dropping into an unnatural, multi-layered register that made Ariana whimper in distress. "You pronounced her dead, Harry. You showed me the dental records. You stood beside me as we burned an empty casket. Tell me why my mate has been scrubbing floors in my basement, or I swear to God I will tear your head from your shoulders." Harry choked his hands, coming up to grip Graham's wrists. "I had to. Graham, listen to me. I had to hide her." "From what?" Graham roared, shaking the man so violently the medical bag dropped to the floor, spilling syringes and gauze. "From the mole in your own house," Harry gasped out, struggling for air. Graham froze the mention of a traitor, snapping his predatory rage into a sharp, calculating focus. He loosened his grip just enough for the doctor to breathe. "Speak!" Harry rubbed his throat, looking over at Ariana, whose eyes were wide with terrified incomprehension. 5 years ago, during the ambush by the Marin County Syndicate, it wasn't a random hit. Someone on the inside disabled the armor plating on Savannah's SUV. Someone wiped the security feeds. When the vehicle went off the cliff and burst into flames, I was the first responder on the scene. I found her. Harry took a shaky breath. She had been thrown from the wreckage. She was barely clinging to life. Her skull was fractured, her face. Graham, her facial structure was completely crushed by the steering column, and she had severe traumatic amnesia. I knew if I brought her back to the estate, whoever orchestrated the hit would finish the job in the infirmary. I panicked. I falsified the dental records using a Jane Doe from the county morgue. Graham let go of the doctor, entirely stepping back, running a hand through his hair as the horrific truth began to set in. "Her face," he whispered, looking over at Ariana. "Multiple reconstructive surgeries." Harry explained, his voice softening. "Titanium plates along the orbital floor and jaw. I did the procedures myself in a private clinic down in Portland. I gave her a new face to keep her anonymous. But even with a new face, her scent and her wolf would give her away to any Caldwell guard." "She has no wolf," Graham argued, his brow furrowing. "She smells like human anxiety and bleach." "Aconite and liquid silver," Harry corrected quietly. "Administered in microdoses, every day for 2 years. I slipped it into the kitchen staff's water supply. It kept her wolf entirely suppressed, artificially inducing an Omega-like state. It masked her scent and kept her memories buried under a chemical fog. I hid her at the bottom of the hierarchy, because I knew Beatrice and the elites would never look twice at a filthy kitchen stray." Ariana sat on the vanity, her mind reeling. The phantom pains in her ribs, the terrible splitting headaches, the daily glasses of water Martha forced her to drink to keep her stamina up. They weren't symptoms of a weak constitution. She had been drugged. suppressed, caged in her own mind. "You played God, Harry," Graham said, his voice dangerously low, a lethal mixture of gratitude and fury. "You watched me mourn her for 5 years. I kept her alive," Harry shot back, finding his courage. "If I had told you, you would have torn this estate apart, looking for the traitor. It would have sparked a civil war, and Savannah would have been caught in the crossfire. She was defenseless. I was waiting for you to stabilize the territory." Ariana pressed her hands to her temples. With the sudden surge of adrenaline and the missed dose of her evening water, the chemical fog in her brain was beginning to thin. A sharp, piercing pressure was building behind her eyes. "Who?" Graham demanded, his eyes narrowing into cold slits. "Who disabled the armor?" "I don't know," Harry admitted. "Only someone with Alpha-level clearance could bypass the SUV's mainframe." A deafening silence fell over the room. Alpha-level clearance. Graham, his father, who was dead, and one other person. The Beta. "Lock down the estate," Graham ordered, his voice echoing with absolute authority. He turned his back to the door, pulling a heavy matte black firearm from a biometric safe hidden behind a mirror. "Nobody leaves. Harry, stay with her. If anyone comes through that door who isn't me, shoot them." "Graham, wait, you can't just—" Harry started. But Graham was already gone, the heavy doors clicking, locked behind him. Left alone with the doctor, Ariana slid off the vanity. Her legs felt like lead. The room was spinning. "Dr. Reed!" she gasped, gripping the edge of the marble sink. "My head! It feels like it's going to split open." Harry rushed to her side, pulling a small penlight from his pocket. "The suppressants are wearing off rapidly. Your metabolism is burning through the aconite because of the adrenaline. Savannah, you need to breathe. Your wolf is waking up, and she's going to be very, very angry." "I'm not Savannah," she cried out, though the conviction in her voice was fracturing. Flashes of light were popping in her peripheral vision, the smell of wet asphalt, the deafening crunch of metal, a man's voice screaming her name in the rain. Before Harry could administer a sedative to ease the transition, a heavy, synchronized thud echoed from the suite doors. Then, a sharp hiss of a blowtorch cutting through the biometric lock. Harry shoved Ariana behind him, grabbing a heavy bronze sculpture from the desk, realizing Graham had taken the only weapon. "Get in the closet," he hissed at her. "Now." But she was frozen. The doors burst inward, splintering off their hinges. Lucas Mercer stood in the doorway. The Beta's suit was immaculate, but his eyes were wild, completely consumed by the predatory madness of a cornered animal. In his right hand, he held a suppressed tactical pistol. "I have to admit, Doc," Lucas said smoothly, stepping over the ruined wood and kicking the door shut behind him. "You hid her well. I've been eating meals cooked by a ghost for 2 years." "Lucas," Harry warned, raising the bronze sculpture. "Graham knows. He's coming for you. Graham is currently busy dealing with 20 Vanguard mercenaries I just let through the south gate," Lucas sneered. "He was a weak Alpha, Harry, blinded by grief. He tanked our investments. He negotiated peace treaties with cartels we should have slaughtered. The pack needed a ruler, not a weeping widower. The Marin Syndicate offered me the seat if I removed the obstacle. I just didn't expect the obstacle to survive a 200-foot drop off a cliff." Lucas raised the gun, aiming squarely at Harry's chest. "It's a shame. You're a good doctor." Pft, pft. 2 silenced shots hit Harry in the shoulder and thigh. The doctor collapsed with a stifled cry, the bronze sculpture clattering uselessly to the floor. Ariana screamed, dropping to her knees beside him. She pressed her bleeding, bandaged hands against his chest, trying to stem the blood. Lucas walked toward her, his heavy footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. He holstered the gun, looking down at her with absolute disgust. He didn't want to shoot her. He wanted the visceral satisfaction of snapping the Luna's neck with his bare hands to prove his dominance once and for all. "Come here, stray." Lucas growled his hands, shifting his claws extending from his fingertips as his beta wolf pushed to the surface. He grabbed her by the throat and hoisted her off the ground. Ariana choked her hands, scrambling against his iron-like grip. She couldn't breathe. The pressure in her skull reached a critical mass. The sheer terror, the physical trauma of the choking, and the complete absence of the suppressants created a violent, perfect storm within her biochemistry. The psychological tether snapped. The dam broke. Decades of memories, emotions, and raw, unfiltered primal power flooded her consciousness in a single agonizing second. She remembered the estate. She remembered her wedding under the blood moon. She remembered the ambush, the betrayal in Lucas's eyes as he watched her car get run off the road. She wasn't Ariana Forrester. She was Savannah Caldwell, the Luna of the Kessler estate, and she was a descendant of the most lethal bloodline in the Eastern Territories. Lucas smiled cruelly, tightening his grip. "Say hello to the ancestors for me, bitch." But the terrified Omega eyes looking back at him suddenly changed. The muddy brown irises shifted, bleeding into a brilliant, glowing, luminescent gold. Lucas's smile vanished. A sudden, terrifying wave of pure, unadulterated alpha lunar aura exploded from the woman in his grasp. It was so oppressive, so heavy, that the glass in the windows spiderwebbed. Savannah didn't whimper. She snarled. With a speed that defied human physics, her hand shot up her own claws, extending from her nail beds. She drove her fingers directly into the nerve cluster of Lucas's forearm. The beta screamed, his grip involuntarily releasing. Savannah hit the ground gracefully, her posture no longer cowering, but coiled and lethal. Before Lucas could recover, the suite doors were ripped completely out of their frames. Graham stood there covered in the blood of vanguard mercenaries, his chest heaving. He took in the scene the bleeding doctor, the traitorous beta, and the woman standing in the center of the room, radiating a golden, furious power that smelled of rainwater, crushed juniper, and vengeance. Lucas, realizing he was trapped between a furious alpha and an awakened Luna, lunged for his gun. "Mine!" Savannah snarled a guttural sound that rattled the floorboards. She didn't need Graham to save her. Using the momentum of a fully awakened wolf, Savannah launched herself forward, sweeping Lucas's legs out from under him. As he crashed to the floor, Graham was instantly upon him. The alpha didn't use a weapon. He used his bare hands, driven by 5 years of agonizing grief and the white-hot rage of betrayal. In 3 brutal, sickeningly loud strikes, Lucas Mercer was permanently silenced. His treason ended on the floor of the master suite. The room fell deathly quiet, save for the ragged breathing of the 2 wolves and the groans of the wounded doctor. Graham slowly stood up from the beta's ruined body. He turned to face the woman he had mourned for half a decade. She looked different. Her face was altered, her hair was a different color, and she wore the cheap-stained uniform of a servant. But as she looked at him, her golden eyes slowly fading back to their natural color, she didn't look away in submission. She held his gaze as an equal. She reached up her trembling fingers, brushing the scar on her neck, the mark he had given her. "Graham," she whispered, her true voice, confident, warm, and entirely hers, breaking through the amnesia for the first time. Graham closed the distance between them, dropping to his knees and wrapping his arms around her waist, burying his face in her stomach, as a sob finally broke from his chest. Savannah sank down with him, holding the most feared alpha in the territory, as he wept, her fingers tangling in his dark hair. She was home. In the aftermath, the Kessler estate was purged of vanguard loyalists. Savannah reclaimed her title, stepping out of the shadows of the kitchens to rule beside Graham. Though her reflection remained a stranger, the fierce lunar spirit within her was undeniably restored. Together they rebuilt their fractured pack, their bond deeper than before, forged not just in moonlight, but in the unbreakable resilience of survival and reclaimed truth.